Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl. This is going to be episode 206 of my poker vlog. This is obviously not my usual setup in terms of intro, outro, but I'm actually in the process of moving. So that's my desk, not fully put together. Actually finishing editing this video on my wife's desk. So, a little bit of fun life news going on. More insane life news will be coming in the next few videos, but as for now, we're playing a 2-5 session at Sarasota, Florida, the One Eye Jacks Poker Club. Let's talk about some poker hands. First hand of note. We start at the 1-3 deep stack table, waiting for 2-5 to open up, and I look down at Ace-10 offsuit in the hijack. With one limp, I make it $20. The button is the only caller, so we end up going heads up to a flop, which is Jack-9-4 Rainbow. So not a whole lot going on for me, but I think my opponent's going to miss and give up a lot of the time, so we're going to just c-bet this one for $20. Having a backdoor straight draw and an overcard leads me to do this bet as well, as the times we're behind, we have a small amount of equity that could help us out on helpful turn cards. My opponent decides to make the call, and the turn is one of those helpful ones. It's the 8 of spades. We actually turn open-ended. I consider betting this a second time. As we pick up equity, it's usually a good idea to throw in the second barrel when you increase your equity from the flop to the turn. But on this one, I think my opponent has like a jack or a single 9. He might not be interested in giving up on those hands when he's versing an opponent who definitely has the ability to bluff in 2-barrel. So I decided to check this one, try to realize some equity, which is a fancy way of saying hope I hit. And my opponent leads out for $30. When he does this, my entire plan goes out the window. I think that this bet is often betting with a weak single pair hand to check back river and get to showdown as easily as possible. So we're going to raise right now. My hand, I think, naturally is one of the only bluffs I would have on this board, where I could easily have like Queen 10, 10-8, Jack 9. A lot of hands that I think are super strong, but only think they can get 2 streets of value and would go for a check turn bet call river line, but happily switch it up when our opponent says that they have some kind of a hand here. So we're going to turn this one into a bluff. We bet $100 on this turn card. My opponent does not take too long before making the call there, which I hate to see, but I don't hate to see the Queen of Clubs on the river.
That's just good stuff.
This is actually quite an interesting hand because I was planning on bombing the river if I miss. But now that I hit it and this obvious 4-liner's out there, I don't think I can bet super big if I expect to get called by like a single jack. Maybe Jack 9 even folds to a bet here because bet flop, check raise turn, bet river is just so strong. And when there's a 4-liner on board, like not too many people have bluffs in their system for this one. So I actually down bet this one significantly. I bet $50. I'm trying to get crying calls from single jacks that not only have to face the 4-liner, but face the overcard as well. And my opponent immediately says, like, you win, I'm going to fold. You win, I'm going to fold. I'm like, okay, well, sure. Holds his cards, holds $50, and then eventually decides to throw the 50 in instead of his cards. And he has pocket jacks. So definitely was not getting that specific one to fold the turn. And as back and forth he was on the river bet, I think I got the actual maximum on the river. I think he would have folded for 100, 200 on the river pretty much 100% of the time. On the next fun hand of poker, I look down at Jack 9 of clubs from the small blind. With one limp, the cutoff makes it 20, I call, and the limper call. So we end up going 3 ways to a flop of Ace, 9, 5, 2 clubs. That's a pair and a flush draw. Cannot get much better than that. I check it to the pre-flop aggressor who goes 2/3 on this one, $40 bet. Higher than half pot's definitely less than standard, I'd say, in these games. But our hand is never folding. Could raise here at some frequency, but I think this opponent has an ace here some of the time and will just never fold to a raise when it's a draw-heavy board. So I make the call. The other player folds. We're heads up to a turn card, which is a 6 of hearts. That is not clubs. I check because I don't have the betting lead, and my opponent checks it back. That is super encouraging. Likely does not have an ace here of any kind, and the river is the 3 of spades. Now I'm going to go for a kind of mergy, blocky bluff bet. I don't want to get blown off my hand. Like if I check and my opponent has air, he's very capable. He can go like 175, 200 on the river with an actual airball bluff, which would absolutely blow me off this hand. So we bet here to block that possibility, or at least reduce the chance of it happening, because I could bet he could still just raise 300, 400 and blow me off anyway, but hopefully he does not choose violence on this one. Additionally, the bluffing side of it is if my opponent has like 10s, jacks, queens, they may just fold to even a small bet, as I would happily value bet an ace here for a $65 sizing. So that's what I throw in there. Hopefully my opponent will fold his middling pocket pairs and not just turn his absolute misses into bomb bluffs. But after a bit of thinking, my opponent goes back and forth. He makes the call, and I just say, you're good, flip over my hand, because I'm definitely going to show, and I want to see what he called me with. He called me with 9-8. So it turns out the Mergie blocker bluff bet was actually value, and I didn't even know it. Running well today with the runouts and threading the needle correctly with the decision making. We're at the 2-5 table now, and it might be the day of ace-10, because with ace-10 of hearts, I'm the +1 spot. I raised to $20. Two late position players, the button and the big blind call, so we end up going 5 ways to a flop, which is ace-10-6, 2 diamonds. When we're betting massively multi-way, we don't have to size up too big. We're betting small to both thin the field and get value from like king, queen, any 2 diamonds, worse aces and strong 10s, and we don't really want to pot it here because that incentivizes all the draws that we're beating to fold, and only like pocket 6s will call it like a pot size or over pot size bet. So we go 30 into 100, and we didn't really thin the field all too much. 3 different players decide to call. Less than ideal, but hopefully we get a brick turn card, which on this time we do. 4 of clubs. I expect any of my opponents to raise here if they had exactly pocket 6s, and no one should really have pocket 4s. So we should have the best hand here always. We're sizing up, get value from all the pre-mentioned draws. We bet $110. This bet does get the players to fold 1 by 1, so we got a good bit of value on the flop. Players must have not been too strong, because I expect draws to call this turn bet as well at a high frequency. We see a middle player hit a straight flush for a high hand bonus. Kind of fun to see that. Congrats to that guy. Before we look down at queen 10 of clubs from the button, with 2 limps, I make it $30. The big blind and 2 limpers call, so we end up going 4 ways to a flop, which is ace, 9, 4, 2 spades. So we really don't connect at all in any way whatsoever on this board. I suppose we could rep an ace some of the time, but into 3 other players, it seems very unlikely that someone doesn't have one themselves, so we're kind of lighting money on fire bluffing on this one. So when it checks to me, I just check this one back, completely done with it, and the turn is the jack of hearts. Now I think we're going to go really small here. When it checks to me a second time, I guess opponents shouldn't have aces all too often. Maybe even a 9 folds to this $30 bet. A cheap priced bluff with open-ended seems like a good idea to me. So when I make it $30, only 1 player decides to call. So we're heads up to a river card, which is the king of hearts.
Whoa, whoa. No offense, Donna, but dude, you're on fire!
As I did think my opponents were weak on the flop and turn, I think things changed now. I think my opponent could have like king jack, king 9, a lot of 2 pairs. If they had missed spades, they're folding to any sizing anyway. So we want to target the 2 pair portion of their range that actually connected with this king here. So I fire $200 into the middle, hoping that my opponent somehow connected well and will pay me off. But it will not be this time. My opponent folds, could not get any value on this river. Maybe going super small might get a crying call from a jack or a single 9, but sometimes you gotta swing for the home runs, especially when you don't block any of the 2 pair combinations that are possible. On the next interesting hand, with the king of hearts and the jack of clubs, on the +1 position, I raised to $15. Early position, I like to go a little bit shorter with my entire range because there's more likely someone behind you can wake up with monsters, and we want to save some money sometimes when they just peel premiums and 3-bet way too big and way too infrequently to get continues out of me specifically. So $15, the hijack button, small blind, and big blind call, so 5 ways to a flop, as has been the day today. This one comes jack 7-6 all hearts, top pair, second nut flush draw. We are loving life here. I'm going to start with a small bet here. I would do this with this exact hand. I'd do this with a made smaller flush, and even like pocket queens, no heart, try to get value from the jack X. On this one, only the player from the button decides to call, so we're heads up to a turn card, which is the 9 of clubs. Very bad card for many reasons. There's some straights get there, jack 9, 9 of hearts gets there. A lot of stuff completes, really bad one. I check it, and my opponent bets $56. All right, strange sizing, but with the king of hearts, we're never folding here. At this point, I'm not even certain I want to hit a heart. I think my opponent would have a single ace of hearts and bet this sizing. So very unclear of where I'm at on this one. Don't know if my pair of jacks are good. Don't know if my king high flush draw is good, but we're not folding for $56. We make the call. And the river is the ace of spades. Well, that one's also very bad. If my opponent did have any bluffs, it's single ace of heart holdings. I check it, and they bet $160. I don't even think my opponent would go that big if he only had the ace of hearts. This is a opponent and player specific hand that I think that he just has a flush here more often than anything else. Don't even think a set here bets this big, so we're just going to fold this one. Let me know if you would have played this one differently in the comments below. Kind of interested on this one.
I know I made an ass out of myself.
Definitely a less than standard hand. We went another smaller, less notable pot before another kind of less notable pot, but one that I will go over just to include to show some of the more standard hands that happen in poker. I button straddle. I have king queen offsuit. With 3 limps, I make it $40 from the button. All the limpers call, so I'm going 4 ways to a flop, which comes king 9-6 rainbow. It checks to a middle position guy who leads for $20. I could raise here. Like, these are often draws trying to name their own price. I guess that would be 7-8 specifically. Maybe a weak 9, maybe a weak 6. I'm not sure, but I choose to just call this one. One other player calls, so we're 3 ways to a turn card, which is the queen of hearts. We bink 2 pair. Jack 10 gets there, but we don't really expect that to be an issue all too often. When it checks to me, I bet $90. 2 pair is a strong hand, so I bet is the methodology on this one. And both players fold. So the hand ends here, and we win another decent sized pot. And the stack's looking pretty good, in for only 1,000, so definitely have some profit going on here. Before the next hand of note, I'm in the low jack with pocket aces, the best hand ever. With an under the gun straddle, I make it $30. 2 late position players call, the small blind, the big blind call, and the straddler calls. So 6 ways is not really what you want to do with aces. They shrivel up heavily this multi-way. Probably should have sized up bigger since all the pots have been very multi-way this day. And even though we could telegraph our hand strength with a larger bet size, it does benefit from reducing the amount of people playing. But regardless, we're 6 ways, and the flop comes 10-5-4 rainbow. Pretty amazing board for pocket aces. I don't think there's too much to be scared of on this board here, and I'm out of position to a lot of players, so I think checking is actually the best option for my entire range. So when it checks to me, I check, see what one of the late position players want to do, and the button decides to throw out $78.
Madness, madness, I say.
Continues with some of these strange sizes, but regardless, when it folds to me, happily call with aces. Could raise here. This could be one of the best check raise candidates we have.
You need to do creative things in creative places.
But we're going to just call here, play chill, see what one of the other players want to do. Everyone else folds, and the turn is the 8 of diamonds. On this one, I check to my opponent, and he bets $126. So he's saying he has a pretty strong hand. Hopefully he has like ace 10 and we can just get all the money in right now. 10-8 would be quite devastating if I run into it, but I'm not going to fold this one and I'm not going to just call. We're trying to get all the money in with our exact hand here. I thought in the real time that my opponent only had about 300, 350 behind after this 126 bet, but in reality it looks like he has about 500 behind. I jam, thinking it's for a lot less than it is. Maybe this is a mistake in hindsight because my opponent snap folds pocket jacks face up.
What have I done?
Never expected a hand like that to fold. Even tank folding would surprise me, but bets 2 times into 6 players and then 2 players, and when one raise just gives it up. Maybe the raise was too big, maybe he just calls the 300, but regardless, aces do not get cracked even when seeing a flop 6 ways, and we take down a pretty good sized pot. On the next interesting hand, I look down at ace-jack offsuit. From early position, I make it $20. The small blind and the big blind decide to call, so we're 3 ways to a flop of jack 7-4 with 2 hearts. We don't have any hearts in our hand, and the big blind decides to lead for $50. I'm not folding ace-jack here, never. So I make the call, and the small blind calls as well, kind of concerning, and the turn is the 10 of spades. Quite a bad turn card, jack 10, maybe 8-9 at some frequency, I'll get there, but still well ahead of the heart draws. And on this time it checks to me, so we're going to bet here because we don't think either opponent has anything but a draw, maybe a single pair plus gut shot. Plenty of stuff that we'd like to get value from, so I bet $85. And now the player that led checked raised to $200. Okay, very unstandard line, very interesting development. We're not going to fold top pair because my opponent could easily have like king jack, maybe jack 9 with a heart, jack 8, 10-8, 10-9. A lot of stuff that I think play this way. Even 5-6 of hearts I think happily plays this way, where any random 2 hearts sometimes. So We're going to make the call here, and the river is the 5 of diamonds. That one I think is a pretty good card. I still beat all the single pair plus gut shots and all the flush draws. So when my opponent checks to me, I'm happy to check it back. And he has 10-7 of clubs. Definitely not the hand I put him on. Definitely not the hand you should ever lead that flop with. But either way, turns a 10, gets a little bit of value on the check raise, but then doesn't go for anything on the river.
Okay, so what have we learned from all this?
I suppose if this player ever check raises, we should just give him credit for having it in the future. We get a little bit back.
God, no, you didn't miss anything.
Before we arrive at the final hand of note. I have Jack 10 of clubs from the button with 1 limp, and early position player makes it 35. I decided to just call this one. Think 3 betting would be an overplay for just Jack 10. Small blind and big blind plus limper call. We are 5 ways, as is the usual on this day. And we flop pretty good on the ace, queen, 8 rainbow board with 1 spade. So technically open-ended double belly buster plus a backdoor spade draw. We're feeling pretty happy with our exact hand. Checks all the way to me. We're going to try to realize our equity. Again, fancy way of saying, hope I get lucky. And today we get very lucky. The turn is the king of hearts.
You are a god!
What a dream spot. And a player leads out for $45. We're going to raise right now. Any heart draw is going to pay us. We unblock all the ace X, all the 2 pair. This is just always going to be a raise for me, and we're going big with it. We want the 2 pairs and draws, of which we block none of them, to really be forced in a bad position, put a lot of money in, out of position with a hand that's drawing very thin to even dead. When I make it $175, my opponent thinks about it for a very short time before folding. Maybe I went too big with this, a little bit greedy by me. Maybe 125 gets called always, but not this one. And we did pretty good today. We make $725 today across 5 hours, which equates to $145 an hour or 29 big blinds an hour. Yeah, extremely thankful. Ran incredibly well today. Can't remember the last time I hit so many straights. Most of them gut shots, so that was super fortunate of me. Maybe bet a little bit too big in some spots. Some of the weekday day players are going to be a little bit tighter than, regular Saturday night, splashy gambling people, and adjustments need to be made for that. But all in all, we will take the win, a strong win, good hourly. Happy to have it. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue these results. If you have made it all the way to this point, thank you. I appreciate it. Please consider subscribing. It would help me out personally a great deal, and I will see you on the next one.